Hi, I'm Tony. I'm an author, presenter at Sky Sports, and years ago I went to the jungle and got ill. Very ill. So this is my podcast adventure to find more energy. It's packed with biohacking, science, health tech, supplements, and some of the most well-known experts on the planet.
This is something I spent 4 months of my life doing with electrodes glued to my head so that you can do a lifetime worth of meditation.
Decide what you don't give a fuck about, which is something you don't care about.
Some of it gets quite out there.
I had some stem cells sent up to my house that I had stored, and then I injected myself with mannitol.
And we even hack hangovers.
Alcohol is poisonous. So is water and oxygen in the wrong dosage.
So that's my podcast, Zestology. Live life with energy, vitality, and motivation. Welcome back, and the big news here in London is that we are not in lockdown anymore. The first thing I did when we were allowed to go round to our friends' back gardens was go round to my friend and play ping pong in his back garden. And it felt like the most incredible liberty after having been locked up for 3 months. Weird times, isn't it? But anyway, today is a guest who I think will make you feel good, make you feel energised, which is the point of this podcast. Ryan Carter is what can only be described as an Instagram sensation with a huge amount of followers. In fact, last time I checked, I think he'd smashed through the 500,000 barrier. He's got more than 500,000 followers on Instagram. With good reason. His content is brilliant and very easy to digest. It's very windy today as I record this podcast in London, so I hope you can hear me okay. A few little Ryan facts for you. He is a registered nutritionist. He is working with clients one-to-one on a regular basis, and that's very relevant for this podcast because we look at what happens if you want to find a coach to work with. I have recently launched a program on my sister site, the Histamine Intolerance Site. And Ryan and I recorded a module on how to find a coach. And when we were recording it, we were saying, well, we should do one of these for the main podcast kind of thing, because I think a lot of people would like to hear this. There's loads of other stuff in here as well. You're going to get so many little hacks in this episode and maybe take it to the next level with a health coach as well. Oh, it's far too windy, this. It's not very pleasant at all. It's supposed to be spring. Anyway, hope you enjoy this podcast. Here he is, Ryan Carter. So what you do is you look at everything. I mean, I suppose that's the kind of the functional element of what you do. You look at all the different aspects of what someone is eating, but all the different aspects of their health and lifestyle. And when someone is looking for a practitioner, how should they find someone who does that? Because that's, I suppose, the difference between working with someone more conventional and working with someone with a bit more of a kind of a functional, bit more of a kind of biohacking background, emphasizing the natural and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I encourage my clients and actually anyone who's just listening to this to take power. Like, it's a big decision that you're embarking on. You're giving someone the trust. You're being honest with them. You're having an open relationship with them, and you are having the faith that they're going to actually be the one person to put you on the path of healing and health optimization or prevention, whatever outlook you want to look on it. So take that power and treat it as an interview. So get really deep with like what you really want to achieve. What are the potential obstacles as well? So understand your self limitations as well, and propose that onto the practitioner in question and treat it as an interview. Is this person equipped to be able to deal with you? Do they have the understanding and empathy as well? Or are they just literally after your money and think they need to do all these testings and throw supplements at you without actually having a real understanding of the complexity of your personalized history and issues presented?
I know that a lot of people, and you as well, you offer these discovery calls. And it's quite interesting because I had a discovery call with someone a little while back, and I'm looking at someone who works specifically in certain areas that are kind of quite niche. And despite it being a discovery call, and this guy's very well qualified as well, I won't mention his name, but he's very well qualified. We talked, he asked me a couple of things. We talked for about 30 seconds and I talked for about 30 seconds. And then he talked for about 20 minutes and I just kind of listened to him. And it was quite frustrating, actually, because not that I like the sound of my own voice, but I kind of wanted to get across what I wanted to work on. And instead, he was just kind of dazzling me with all his knowledge. And at the end of the 20 minutes, I felt rather deflated because I thought he clearly knows a lot, but also he's clearly not willing to actually listen, which was a real disappointment. I suppose that's a skill that is, really important in your world.
Yeah, I think the use of discovery calls, obviously complimentary discovery calls, is a great aid to a good sounding board for the person. So obviously you can propose, like I said previously, an interview. You can propose them questions, how they'll handle your case, if they've had any history dealing with perhaps symptoms that you're expressing. And you'll just get a vibe basically of them. Yeah. Like you said, that the guy liked to talk. The person likes the sound of his own voice and wasn't actually listening to you or actually understanding how he can help you or what's troubling you and every other factor contributing to your health. Just understand these are like areas where you can question, pick up some red flags perhaps. And I like it. It's an opportunity. It's not just the client proposing questions to me, for example, but it's also I can suss out if the client is actually approachable to some of my recommendations or methodologies that I perhaps use. And if there is if there's good rapport there, like I don't personally want to be working with someone who's going to be quite simply a pain in the ass, basically. But there's going to be some leniency there, but like it's a relationship and it's got to work for both parties. The communication needs to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And obviously originally the reason we set this all up is because I'm just going to go over again what we did. I've set up this course on my Histamine Intolerance site. It's a program and it's called From Histamine Intolerance to Healed. And I've tried to, in 10 different modules, although I'm now actually adding bonus modules on things like the Oura ring and stuff like that. I've tried to, on the 10 modules, address the things that people find are the most commonly asked questions that they can't find the answers to around histamine intolerance. And one of them is people always asking me, how do I find a practitioner? What do I need to do? How do I find one? And what are the questions I need to ask? So we recorded something separate. We recorded a module, didn't we, for my course? And thanks so much for doing that, because it was really enjoyable. And it really helped me knowing the kind of things you would look for with histamine intolerance, knowing the kind of things you would work on, the kind of approaches you might take, and the kind of areas where you might get stuck with histamine intolerance as well. So thanks so much for that. And anyone who's interested, I definitely encourage people to check it out. In fact, I'll try and come up with a discount code right now, a Zestology discount code for 20% off if people want to use that on histamine-intolerance.net. But the module with Ryan is module number 8, and it was really helpful listening to you. So thank you for doing that. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah. It was good fun to do as well.
Yeah, I mean, histamine is such a complex subject because you're not born histamine intolerant or don't have histamine sensitivities from the get-go. And there's many ways that we can experience them, the sensitivities, environmental factors, stress, and even understanding a practitioner who can work solely with histamine is very complex in your learning as a practitioner, or however route or qualification that you took to become a practitioner. It's only a small element of your learning, and it's only briefly discussed. And some institutes or education educators will just briefly touch upon it, talk about like the methyltransferase enzymes and diamine oxidase, and don't look any further than that. And obviously the role of mast cell activation and a number of things, but it's just brushed briefly. And it's a very complex subject, and a lot of people don't really understand how troubling it can be, like not being able to sleep.
I do. It's unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, everyone's different as well with histamine. I mean, it's really interesting on the Histamine Intolerance site. I've been running these various polls, and people you wouldn't believe how many people get involved in these polls, because people love to talk about it, and because everyone's experience is differently. I've just been doing these high-low polls based on different foods. Are they high or low histamine for you? And it's amazing how split some of them are. If it's carbs, it's quite easy to look at a burger and say, well, the bun on that burger's probably got some carbs in it. But, when it's Pistachios. I think we've got that running at the moment, and that was like 33% said it was high, and about 66 said it was, or 67 said it was low. But then we've got raspberries split right down the middle. Thousands of people voting, and literally 50% of people saying it's high histamine for them, and 50% of people saying it's low. So it's one of those topics where people are just, each experience is individual, and that makes it a total headfuck to deal with.
Definitely. I mean, it's a complex subject, just looking at individual foods, because typically we don't just eat singular foods, we're eating it in a meal. And obviously the previous meal to that is going to affect our response to the next meal. So and that's where personalized nutrition comes in, and an approach which can have that detail for someone to have that magnifying glass look at, that support. And actually that's what a great thing you're doing, is building that community where people can share ideas, but at the same time you have to understand that's like the element of biohacking. It's all about N=1, and utilizing testing, utilizing self-awareness with like, if it's just data tracking, and looking at your individual response and seeing things which move the needle for you.
Yeah.
But it's very hard in this sort of community of like biohacking, health optimization, where there'll be very high influential figures, and they'll be like, okay, this worked for me. It's all about Totem Sport, for example, their electrolytes, and that is the cure. And in fact, okay, that's just possibly one element there, but there's many other things to factor in as well.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. That's the thing with like biochemistry and nutrition. It's just very on a food-based level, and there's a whole host of other things we have to factor in. How sensitive are we to on a cell membrane, for example? How well our receptors work in the expression of enzymes, the pH, even body temperature, for example, which is the be-all end-all of like chemical reactions to occur. So there's a lot of variance there as well.
Yeah. It's like a jigsaw puzzle for you, isn't it? You get all these different elements in. There's probably a lot of work that you have to do, especially as the people who are likely to kind of seek you out are the ones who it's not particularly simple always to work it out. I mean, certainly with histamine intolerance, yeah, you're right. I still haven't really got to the bottom of why the histamine intolerance is there. And so you have to sit down and put all the pieces together. It's not an easy process.
Yeah, it's something I love though. Connecting the dots.
Well, you've always been to, ever since I've known you, which is a long time now. You're really into firstly helping people, but also all the different areas of health and how they slot together.
Yeah, definitely. I don't classify myself as an expert or a guru in one specific niche. I do see that like being helpful for some people, but for me, the understanding of a global system, and whether it's like breath work, which I'm a practitioner as well in, or whether it's like methylation, whether it's on the stress response, whether it's on like resilience, whether it's on whatever it is, oxalates or gut health or the microbiome, is actually have a baseline, and over time broaden my learning, whether it be from reading a book or whether it do completing an additional course on SIBO, for example, which I've recently done, and always greater learning for greater understanding to help my clients, basically. Because if you're just focused on methylation, for example, like you're not going to get the understanding of something else, or how the gut might be contributing to methylation with it producing B vitamins, for example.
Yeah. You mentioned dehydration or hydration and Totem Sport a couple of moments ago. I mean, that's something that's really interesting. It's something that quite a few people talk to me, not just in relation to histamine intolerance. I get so dehydrated all the time and I can't work it out. And what I find interesting is that you can buy electrolytes of all different styles, in that some will have loads of sodium and hardly any potassium. Some will have loads of potassium and hardly any sodium. I have a feeling that the ones with potassium suit me rather better, but it's a part of the jigsaw I'm still trying to slot in, to be honest. I cannot work out why I am so dehydrated all the time, especially when I work out. It's just ridiculous afterwards.
So when you classify dehydration, what would that mean to you?
Well, firstly, there's like a thirst in the mouth, but then it's also, and I know that could be something else like adrenals, but it's also, I mean, yesterday, for example, I've just signed up to the Peloton app, which I've basically turned my nose up at for absolutely ages, and it is brilliant. It's so good. It's all in time to the music. We've got an exercise bike here. We've got one of the Carol AI bikes, but it syncs up with the Peloton. So it's tenner a month for the Peloton app, and you can just do all these fun workouts. So I really got a sweat on yesterday. And then come the evening, I was at Sky until midnight working. And I had a massive headache, really thirsty. Woke up this morning with a dry throat, clearly dehydrated and feeling groggy as well. I've been desperately kind of necking electrolytes and trying to feel better all day, and not quite knowing why I get so dehydrated after exercise, because I thought I'd hydrated okay, but maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, hydration is a complex subject, and the notion that you need to drink gallons of water per day is like fairly invalid. We produce water ourselves from metabolism, so essentially a byproduct of creating energy, ATP. It will be creating water in the mitochondria, and that will be hydrating proteins in the mitochondrial matrix, but also in the cytosol, so that fluid in the cell. And this is where the biochemistry reactions occur. So a powerful component there is how the environment influences this water which we've made. So like drinking more water, technically, it may help. It may help the extracellular. But what about the intracellular spaces? And again, with electrolytes, ideally we'll be able to get them all from food. And this is where the regulatory role of like the kidney function would happen here, and controlling the sodium, potassium, magnesium as well. And the adrenals will have an effect on this as well, in how much sodium they require. When we're obviously under stress, the stress reaction there will be like loss of electrolytes, and then we need to remineralize, have more salts. But at the same time, there could be too much sodium. I think people obviously are coming around to the idea that salt is not the devil. We do need sodium, but at the same time, I think I've seen people oversalt and go too extreme with that. And not having enough magnesium in place as well. And there's a circadian rhythm as well to the way that electrolytes are utilized. And the best way is that a blood test, and sodium, potassium, you can see with that. And that will give us some idea around about adrenal function.
Yeah.
Because we do potassium wasting, or if it actually looks into the health of the cell. So if our cells are breaking down, we're going to be having more potassium in the blood, for example, as a byproduct of cell breaking down. So that will give some indication of if there's cell destruction going on. But generally, like, we can be dehydrated from technology alone. So being around Wi-Fi, being on our phone, being indoors away from the infrared spectrum of light, and also the red light and the full spectrum. This is what truly is going to hydrate us, or really going to create that charge in the water, for example. And this is based on a principle from a gentleman called Gerard Pollock, called the fourth phase of water, and how water actually acts as a battery with the reaction of light and its polar charges, so a positive and a negative, and water actually acts as a battery in the cell.
Wow.
And this is where the individual personalized message comes home. It's like, you notice you need more potassium. Someone else might feel terrible with potassium, especially first thing in the morning. And again, like, the notion of that potassium is only found in bananas is like hilarious as well. It's really high in meat, for example, which most people don't even think of. But generally, like in a hotter environment, for wherever you're based around the world, that's going to be expressed in local seasonal food, for example. In the summer, that's where we'll find more potassium-rich fruits and vegetables. For example.
Wow.
So there's a connection.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's a connection there that we need more hydration. And I don't know. I think when there's more hydration, there'd be, and when there's more magnesium in our bodies and things are working well, there'd probably be less need for salt or sodium, or depending on like how much you're exercising, how much you're sweating, because when we sweat, we're losing a large amount of sodium as well. And like you can taste your sweat and see.
So
how
magnesium
salty it is.
helps with hydration as well.
So magnesium helps with keeping the electrolytes in the body, as well as sulfur as well. And bicarbonate, they act as buffers in the kidneys to regulate the electrolytes. And that's where chloride comes in there as well. And that has an effect on the NMDA receptors in the brain. And that can influence histamine, for example. The sensitivity to histamine in the brain. Chloride will have an effect there with the but EMF as well, so the voltage gated calcium channels. When we're around EMF and technology, these gates in the cell membrane will open and it will flood the cell with calcium, and as a result, it will change the positive negative balance of the cell, and magnesium will come out of that. So technically, being around technology is going to dehydrate us to a certain way, but being in nature, being in daylight or red light therapy devices, that's actually going to be creating like charge within our water, within our like hydration, hydrated cells.
Yeah.
Like drinking more, like drinking 5 liters per day is probably the wrong way. Having a decent amount of salt and going with taste, intuition is really important here.
I do. It's a good reminder with the magnesium as well. Big fan of the magnesium breakthrough, and I've got some of that downstairs, so I'll neck a little bit more of that. And
that's the biooptimizers, isn't it?
Who are
but again, like
partners.
Like magnesium is needed for, especially more so with histamine sensitivities, to work the methylation cycle, and just any energy that our body makes requires magnesium. So technically it's magnesium ATP. So it's required. And stress depletes that. And we're in a society which is extremely stress depleting.
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, that's actually last week there was a big cold spell. And as we record this isn't going to go out when hopefully the weather's a little bit warmer, but the massive cold spell. It was the coldest set of nights in about 10 years in the UK. And our boiler broke. And it was so stressful. It's about so I'd done everything right. I was wearing my blue blockers and I'd read my book, and about 10:15 I thought, you know what, I'll go and check on Stan. I walked into his room. There's a nice temperature, and I thought, it's a bit cold in here, a bit colder than I thought. I realized that the boiler had broken, and it was such a stressful night because I was really worried he was going to get too cold. We didn't have anything to warm him up. We had no heating for a couple of days, and actually got quite stressful. And that's where I can tend to be a little bit hyper vigilant anyway. I mean, Faith was fine. She was like, oh, whatever, just put an extra jumper on. But I was all worried and trying to get extra electric heaters at 7:30 in the morning from B&Q and that kind of thing. So yeah, there might be an adrenal element as well, because sometimes I think we're a bit like animals when there's an adrenal spike and then it goes away and the danger has passed. It can often take quite a while, I think, for it to manifest physically in the body. Do you agree with that? Do you think there's something in that?
Yeah, definitely. There's nothing wrong with having a cortisol spike, and the stress response. Stress is needed, and cortisol is our way of dampening down actually stress. So lowering adrenaline, noradrenaline, and that's what cortisol does, and that's how it liberates sugars from our bodies, from muscles or a bit from fat stores, and liberating that for energy as an energy reserve. But that again, it's a personalized approach to how responsive we are to that stress and how we get that resilience and adaptation and go back to normal. Or there's some subpopulation that actually just freezes with stress as well. And freezing is probably the worst thing that you could probably do, because if that happens in the wild, you'll probably be dead because you'll be eaten alive, chasing from a wild, a tiger, for example, or whatever situation you're in. But again, there's some psychosomatic therapies which are really good there, using breath work as well, building up carbon dioxide in our blood, which is going to have a beneficial effect on our respiratory rate and improving oxygenation, and even emotional therapy work, a component called traumatic traumatic response exercises. I'm butchering the name, so it's called TRE. And it's a way of the body's actually shaking out trauma and stress And like how animals, you see in like on the nature programs, in the documentaries, animals are shaking after being chased, or a dog will shake, for example, with thunder. Humans have that same response built in, but we are just not connected to it.
You mentioned I suppose that's what I'm getting at with the kind of the physical response that comes a while after the kind of mental intensity. And actually it might be mitigated by doing some of that work a lot sooner. I mean, that's why I absolutely love emotional freedom therapy or tapping. Very same reason. You know, it is helping you to connect with and release the emotions through physicality, and it's absolutely amazing.
I think the big one here is that it goes back to your brain and the centers in the brain. Like, are you able, and do you feel it's safe to process the stresses, for example? Are you equipped to handle them? Is this a safe time for you? And typically that might occur only when we're just about to go to bed in our beds, in a bedroom, for example, and we can deal with it then because we feel safe. We're around a blanket. It's nice and warm, for example. We don't have to think about work and relationships or food. And that's when
we can leave our phone out of the bedroom and it's all good, which I hope people are doing now. It's taken me a while to do that, but it really helps.
Yeah, but on the priority scale, it's like, let's deal with what's right in front of us physically. Let's get us out of the situation. Let's make us safe. And then we can deal with that programming later on. It's not important right now. But essentially, it's about just building your adaptation, your resilience to every sort of stress factor, and coping with it better. Obviously being aware of it, not dismissing stress, but coping with it, being resilient to it. And a lot of that's done through like cardiovascular health, actually looking at the heart brain connection, or the brain heart connection. It's bi-directional, and focusing on our breathing on our heart. So this is a thing called heart math. I'm not sure if you've heard of them. But like being aware of
heart math monitor somewhere.
Yeah, so that's amazing for building up a resilience and improving our energy reserves in dealing with stress. I'm actually just doing a course as we speak. Just to understand their system better and perhaps apply it more with clients. I actually don't have their system or their device, but I
first got it in 2009, I think. I mean, so long ago, and it was like just something you clip to your ear, and then you sync it up with your MacBook, and it gives you scores.
I think it's phenomenal. But I think you can do that with the Aura Ring now, with how Aura uses the meditation function. So it actually gives you a real-time heart rate variability and heart rate response. I believe so. I looked at it this morning because I was like, do I really want to try and get sell out for this device? And I don't know when it will come to Mexico, for example. But I think the Aura Ring, and I'll probably use this on a client tomorrow when we do some breathwork exercises and look at their I might try it myself later on today and see how functional it is.
The Muse headband is an interesting one as well. It's got an EEG in it. I mean, EEGs used to cost £10,000 or something like that. And now you can get a Muse headband that costs a couple of £100. You put it on, it syncs up and it reads all the different brainwave states and then guides you with neurofeedback to more positive states or more relaxed, or whatever you want to achieve. And that is really interesting, a really interesting application of technology. And there's been a lot of studies where places like Stanford and Harvard want to study neurofeedback, and the cheapest way for them to do it on a lot of subjects is just to buy a load of Muse headbands. So it's quite interesting, the technology that they've come up with. So that's an interesting one in terms of the nervous system and the emotional response as well. And all of this goes to show how much you do with your clients and in how many different areas. And thanks so much again for talking about what people might do in terms of finding a practitioner, also doing that module on the course on my site. If you've ever said you're going to go with your gut, it's not just a saying. Your gut really is connected to your brain, and signals pass back and forth between them. Interrupting this podcast for one moment to tell you about my podcast partner today. And it's an important one because 74% of us are suffering from digestive problems. And it doesn't have to be a long, drawn out process to start making them better. You can change your gut microbiome and start to feel better in as little as 72 hours. Here's how to do it. My friends at Bioptimizers have developed an exciting new formula that combines cutting-edge nutrition that you would normally find in two separate products. It is powerful probiotics and prebiotics and nootropic and adaptogenic brain herbs. They're the ones that boost your mood, manage stress, help you improve your memory, and it's all in one formula called Cognibiotics. I love this. It's the perfect solution for supporting your gut health, brain health, mental health at the same time. It is bang on target for Zestology, where we're looking to boost our mood, feel more energized, and feel a little bit more revitalized as well. The best bit is perhaps that Cognibiotics comes with a full 1-year guarantee, so you can try it, and if you don't like it, just send it back, get a refund. Simple as that. You can go to cognibiotics.com/zestology. That is cognibiotics.com/zestology. You'll see a picture of me on there, and you can use the code zestology10 to receive 10% off. So that's cognibiotics.com/zestology. If you're in the UK, just head to bioptimizers.co.uk and use the same discount code zestology10. That is going to get you 10% off all the Bioptimizers products. And I'm really focused at the moment on energy and re-energizing on this podcast, and I think this is just bang on target. It's a blend of gut health, a bit of biohacking, and boosting your mood as well. Cognibiotics.com/zestology. Use the code zestology10 for powerful probiotics, prebiotics, nootropics, and adaptogenic brain herbs. Back to the show. Obviously, I've asked you this question before, but I'll ask you again. What's one book that you would recommend and one tip for living with more energy and vitality? And you can't say working with a client in Mexico.
Okay. So the book question I always get, I love. I'm a big fan of books and reading. Actually, on my intro newsletter, I put like my top 5 books that I recommend most people. And actually, it's a really good selection of different subjects. So if you're interested in that, sign up to my newsletter, obviously on my website.
Brilliant.
But my number one book is, and a big mentor in terms of my learning, is Dr. Jack Kruse, and it'll be his book called Epi Paleo, EPI Paleo, and it's an amazing book. It's probably about 10 years old, and it's just a step above most paleo beliefs or the paleo paradigm. Phenomenal book. It's fairly detailed, but most people will get it. Most people understand it.
Great.
There's a lot of information on there. That would be my favorite book. And in terms of living with more vitality, it'll be like, get more aware about your feelings, get uncomfortable with them, understand what's going through, and just sit with it. You don't have to process it. You don't have to think about it. Just feel what's flowing through you. And it might be a bit uncomfortable at first, but your brain will reestablish baseline, and this is the first part of healing for me, is actually getting comfortable with your self-awareness and your perception of like your life and your reality you're creating, essentially, because you can have a massive influence on that with just your thoughts alone, without even eating any sort of food or reading any books. Is just change your thinking patterns, and like my own healing, like my own journey to health as well. Dealing with emotions, dealing with the way I think, is like typically brushed under the carpet, especially for males. But you have to go for it. Otherwise, like, healing will never begin, or you won't be aware of like the patterns that you're doing for the benefit, for positive or the negative. And you won't know like how far you've actually moved or moved the needle, if you don't have that awareness built in self-subjectively, because we're so driven by data, and it's not always about data. It's like, boom, like, how am I feeling today? What's going through my head? What emotions am I feeling? Am I feeling joy? Am I feeling gratitude? Am I feeling love? Or am I feeling a bit fearful? I'm a bit nervous, I'm a bit irritable, or am I being a bit, what's the word? Yeah. Don't need to go, but a bit grumpy.
Yeah.
But yeah, and obviously just get outside in nature is the simplest and easiest thing to change your mood. Get into nature, and it's free. It's really not that hard.
With the emotional component and the mental component of what's going on, I think that is really relevant, and the data can come on that as well. I mean, certainly with histamine intolerance, it is often the thing that makes the most difference to me, and I know a lot of other people as well. Just dealing with less stress, more fun, more relaxation, and doing the things that suit you. Less sitting in front of screens. And then, of course, when you do that, not only do you start to feel better, I mean, you mentioned the Oura ring a little bit earlier on. It'd be interesting to see how your Oura stats stack up in Mexico, because I certainly found mine were best ever. And I know you're working in Mexico, but when I was last on holiday in a sunny place, my Oura ring stats went through the roof. They were brilliant. And of course, because I wasn't working so hard, and I was just spending loads of time outside and loads of time
putting your feet in the sand, grounding.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then the data followed as well, which is really nice.
Yeah. And it's a slippery road, because I know it's like very hard for people to say, oh, this guy's just saying, think about your emotions and all this kind of things. He doesn't know what I'm going through, and the sensitivities and a nightmare with foods I have to eat. But yeah, of course. But if we're not really looking at the mindset of things, we're always going to be experiencing these emotions. We're always going to be super vigilant and super focused, and like not letting go of the potential for change to actually occur. And that's a big fighting battle for some clients, is like the potential that they can have, and like we can definitely work on it and remove these sensitivities and your health issues. But you really got to believe in it and plant the seed and go through that sort of mind work, essentially.
Yeah. Ryan, thank you. I've got a nasty feeling this Zoom call is going to run out at some point soon, because I haven't paid my subscription. So
I don't either.
I don't need it. So listen, if people want to take that course from Histamine Intolerance to Healed, it's at histamineintolerance.net. And the module with Ryan is number 8, and use the code Zestology for 20% off. If people would like to work with a practitioner, there are plenty more details on that module that Ryan created. But also, you've given us so much information and so much quality knowledge on this podcast, and people might want to work with Ryan. So I know you've got your newsletter up and running now, which is really cool as well. Where can people find out more about you and get in touch with you?
Yeah, simple. My website. So it's www.livevitae.com. So live as it is, and vitae being VITAE.com. And that's the best place to book a complimentary discovery call with me, for me to listen to you, understand what's going on, and whether or not I will be able to help you, and whether or not you feel that I will be able to help you too, because it's a journey together, which I guide and support you. And the first step is down to you being able to make that first step to change, and reach out, obviously. But yeah, reach for me on my website. And yeah, thank you very much, Tony.
Yeah. Just before you go, you mentioned sulfur a little bit early on. It made me think of those hot springs we went to in Ojai once.
Oh yeah.
we went to these amazing.
It smelled like eggs for 3 days.
It was disgusting. However many times we scrubbed ourselves, our whole bodies smelt of sulfur, didn't they, after those hot springs? But we were the only ones that smelt of sulfur. Nobody else smelt of sulfur. And it's disgusting. Every time I smelt my skin, I smelt of sulfur. I couldn't scrub it off. It was gross. Oh dear. Supposedly
that was an amazing trip.
That was an amazing trip, wasn't it? Yeah. It's one of those ones where I think even in the moment I realized how lucky we were, but I look back and I think, what an astonishing time we had. And that was near Santa Barbara, I think, and we drove up from there. And the weather changed, didn't it, as we went up? It got colder and colder as we drove up into Ojai. But what an amazing experience!
That was some beautiful, actually, landscape there.
Yeah, really good. Ryan, good to talk to you. Have a good one. Thanks for coming on Zestology. We'll speak again soon.
Okay, take care, Tony.
Well, that code again for the program on histamine-intolerance.net is Zestology. Simple. It'll get you 20% off if you want to take that program, and Ryan does module 8 with me on that program. It's histamine-intolerance.net and use the code Zestology. I'm still strolling around the streets of London, and just to remind you that next week's podcast is going to be a special one. It's going to be an announcement podcast. I hope you can join me for that. I can't really tell you any more for now, but I would like to say that next week's podcast I think you will enjoy. And today's podcast is brought to you by Cognibiotics. And actually, it's occurred to me recently when I was placing an order on their site that Cognibiotics is one of the Bioptimizers supplements that is brilliant. It's brilliant for your gut and for your mind as well. But that code Zestology10 works on all the Bioptimizers sites, the one in the UK and the one in the US, and it won't just work for Cognibiotics, it will work for everything. So, one of the products that I love from Bioptimizers is their Magnesium Breakthrough product, and I wish they gave it to me free, but they don't, even though they sponsor this podcast. So I was on their site the other day, used the code Zestology10 and used that to get 10% off magnesium. So you can use it for magnesium, Cognibiotics and everything else as well. Right, that is it. Thank you again for listening. I'll see you next week for the announcement.